Alright guys, so today we are going to be moving from microeconomics, where we're looking at our economy on a small scale, looking at individuals and businesses, to where we're going to be looking at our economy on a large scale now. And by economy, I'm just looking at individuals, businesses, and governments and how they kind of interact with one another financially. So instead of looking at it on a small scale, with macroeconomics, the keyword there being macro, we're looking at things on a large scale now. All right, and so what I want you to do, and you don't need to do this on a sticky note, you can just do this on the side of your notes. I want you to think about if someone were just to ask you, hey, is our economy doing well right now or not? You know, what kind of things might you think about, right? What kind of either personal or large scale things might you think about to kind of decide how you would answer that question? And so I'll give you a second to write this down, and then I want to talk a little bit about together. All right, because we use our own kind of means of measuring these things. All right, so let's look at a couple different things. Let's look at Glenn County specifically, right? If I were to ask you which parts of Glenn County are doing well right now, you might say up there on the strike zone area, up there kind of on north side of Glenn County, right? We've got new businesses popping up, new apartments, new houses popping up there. And so there's a lot of different factors that we might look at. So businesses are definitely one of them, whether we have businesses opening up or whether we have businesses closing down. Other factors that we might look at. Right, average income, how much are people making? So right now, our economy is kind of in recovery from this recession that we're going through. All right, and so looking at things over the past 10 years, all right, you can look at things like wages, how much people are making, how much more expensive goods you're getting over time. That would be what we call inflation. And the big one you can look at right now is unemployment numbers. So right now we've got the largest unemployment that we've had since 2008 during that last recession, kind of hovering around 9 or 10%, when the norm is about 3 or 4%. All right, and so there's a lot of different factors that we look at to kind of decide how our economy is doing, and the government will then use that data and make decisions off of that. And we'll look at the decisions that they make as well, because right now we're using a lot of them. And I guess my pen's not working today. All right, so to start out with, another thing I want you to do, and if you want to pause it, you can, but I want you to copy down this chart, and I want you to kind of tell me your predictions here. So we've got the early 1900s, and then we've got today, or 2018 is the last data set that I have. All right, so for each of these 4 categories, I want you to write down your prediction for 1900, all right, and your prediction for today. What you think the average life expectancy is, like how long people live for. Per capita income, if you see that term per capita, that just means per person. So like per capita dogs might be per person, how many people have dogs in the country. Per capita income is looking at the income per person on average. So what do you think it was in 1900? What do you think it is today? All right, then I want you to do the poverty rate. What percentage of the population do you think is below that poverty line? All right, which I believe is $14,000 a year now. So what percentage of Americans do you think make less than that? And then finally, a high school completion rate. All right, in 1900, what percentage of the population do you think graduated high school? And today, what percentage of the population do you think graduated high school? So if you want to pause me and kind of jot some of those ideas down, then we'll come back together and talk about it. All right, so let's take a look at a couple of them together. All right, so for the average life expectancy, back in the early 1900s, it was 47 years old. Today, it's 79 years old, right? And a lot of factors go into this, but one of the biggest ones is standard of living, right? Now we've got much better access to vaccines. We got a much better understanding of nutrition, right? Our diets are a lot better. We've got better housing. We don't have child labor anymore, so we're not losing kids to that. And so all of these factors have led our life expectancy to grow by about 30 years over the past 100 years. All right, per capita income in the early 1900s, all right, was $520, or adjusted for inflation, $5,600 in today's money. All right, so we're going to talk about inflation a lot in this class, all right, how the cost of goods are growing over time. But I'm sure you, sorry, one
Good
second.
morning, teachers. Couple of announcements this morning. If you'll remember, I sent out an email yesterday or the day before with the professional learning opportunities, the virtual professional learning opportunities that are available today. Make sure that you log on to those and check those out. If you missed the announcement or the email from Dr. Spence yesterday, you may want to go back and look for a forward for me, because that's some pretty good news for today. I know we all are thankful for him and for him thinking of us. At this time, if you missed breakfast this morning, there's an opportunity for you to get a biscuit right now and maybe a donut here in the very near future in the next couple of minutes, because they're on the way here. The folks from Keep Glen Running and a couple of different groups in the community, but Coast Pines being one of them, are in the front of the building, and they would love to share a little food with you, as well as a little information on how, on the opportunities that our students have for careers in Glen County after high school. So come on down and have a chat and have a biscuit. I hope everybody has a fabulous day. Remember, today is City Championship Day. If you don't have your blue on now, make sure you have it on later. There's going to be a lot of activity around the stadium this afternoon. If you want a good seat, get there early. If you haven't purchased a ticket, you can purchase one on the mobile app or website, GoFan. They're $10. I believe they're $10 for reserve as well as for regular seats. So purchase a ticket before you go. Don't validate it until you get to the stadium. You'll see that once you open up the app. So again, come on down, get you a little breakfast, have a conversation about the opportunities that our students have in Glen County, and have a fabulous day.
All right, guys, sorry about that. So what we see, the per capita income, 520 back in the early 1900s, and today it's about $53,000. All right, so when we say adjusted for inflation, we're looking at the cost of goods going up over time. And I'm sure you guys have seen this in your own lives, right? Before, McDonald's used to have a really big dollar menu with like tea and McDoubles and fries and shakes and all kinds of stuff on there. But since the cost of, everything's gone up, beef, cheese, bread, all right, they're not able to do that anymore. And so inflation is just the cost of goods going up over time, and we'll look at pretty soon how to calculate that inflation. All right, so the poverty rate back in the early 1900s was 40%. That's dropped down to about 14.5%. All right, and so that's still a significant number, don't get me wrong. All right, but that's dropped off significantly now that we've got better safety net programs in place, right? Even though we do have a lot of people that would naturally be under that poverty line, with the addition of food stamps or the addition of subsidized housing, things like that, it adds on to their income. High school completion rate back in the early 1900s is about 22%. Today it's about 80%. For Brunswick High, it's about 90%. So we're kind of ahead of the national average there, which is pretty good. All right, so yeah, now that we've gotten these child labor laws, all right, now that we've gotten a heavier emphasis on education, all right, people's standard of living across the board is increasing. All right, so let's skip ahead a little bit. All right, so first off, I want to look at some factors that affect these three kind of overall goals that we have for our economy. First off, our big goals are that we increase income levels, so people are making more money. All right, we increase employment levels, making sure that people have jobs. All right, and we want to keep prices pretty stable. We don't want goods to get too expensive too quickly. All right, and so the big factors that go into these things are how we spend money, right? So we're going to look at a couple different categories today when we're calculating GDP. All right, we're going to look at household spending or consumer spending. All right, we're going to look at government spending. That would be things like the military or schools. All right, we're going to look at business investments, like all of these new businesses popping up around Sam's Club. All right, that's really helping our economy right now in Brunswick. All right, and then we're going to look at imports and exports and what they do for our economy. All right, so yeah, first off, our big goals here. All right, we want to keep a low unemployment rate. Usually our goal is 4% or lower. All right, we know that realistically, we're never going to, unless we become socialists, unless we have some kind of, command economy, we're never going to reach 0% unemployment. And a little bit of unemployment's a good thing. That means that people are trying to find better jobs, right? When I left college, I didn't immediately, pick up the first job that I found. I waited until I could find the right job. All right, we try to keep stable prices. Usually goods get about 1 or 2% more expensive per year, and that's completely normal. So when I bought my house, I bought it for $170,000. All right, now that house is worth about $180,000. Not because of anything that I've done to it, right? We haven't painted the house or done anything like that. The main thing is because of inflation. All houses in that area are getting more expensive. All right, generally about 1 or 2% more expensive per year. All right, and that's why whenever you started high school, the sodas in the drink machine over there were about $1, and now they're $1.25. All right, so we also want continuous growth. We want our economy to continue to grow. We want new businesses to open up, all right, because that keeps the ball rolling. All right, and so what we're going to look at with macroeconomics and what you're going to kind of play around with as well tomorrow and the day after are some of the tools that we can use to influence our economy. All right, if our economy is not doing well like it is right now, sometimes the government will step in to help kind of regulate things a little bit. All right, so 2 big things that we need for our economy to be successful, all right, is our population and access to capital. So if you look at what's happening in Europe right now, so there's a big migration crisis from Syria because they're in the middle of a civil war. So you've got millions of Syrians that are fleeing the country, all right, and they're coming into Europe. Now, a lot of European countries have closed their doors and said, you're not welcome here. Sorry, we're already having issues of our own, especially with COVID-19. All right, but one country in particular, Germany, has thrown their doors wide open and said, all right, any Syrian refugee can come into our country. All right, and really it's because of this population. Germany's population is actually on the decline. What that means is they're losing people faster than they're gaining people. Their death rate is higher than their birth rate now. Generally what you see is in developed countries, birth rates start to drop after a while, right? In poorer countries, the average family will have 4 or 5 children. In wealthier countries, they'll have 1 or 2 children. All right, and that could be access to birth control, that could be better career planning or education planning. And so because Germany's economy needs to continue to grow, they need people from somewhere. And so they're welcoming in these Syrian refugees. Largely, I mean, like part of it's like philanthropic. They're trying to be, a good global citizen, I guess. But a big part of it's their economy needs more people in it. All right, secondly, we need access to capital or to tools. All right, and so this is where we really excel in the United States. All right, if you look at the fact that we produce more food than any other country in the world, it's not because we have more farmers, it's because we've got better technology for it. If you look at most public universities, like the University of Georgia, for instance, most of these are what we call land and sea grant universities. The land part of that is, since like the early 1700s, or not the early 1700s, since the 1700s, the United States has been giving money to these colleges to develop agricultural technologies. So like Florida A&M, Texas A&M, the A in there stands for agricultural. And so a lot of the technology that we use today was originally created at these colleges for the intention of making food production better in the United States. All right, I want to skip this. Yeah. All right, and so a saying that I really like is that when we're looking at innovation, when we're looking at driving our economy forward, all right, it's not about getting more ingredients, it's about getting better recipes, right? So we can use the same amount of resources as other countries, but we can use it in a much more efficient manner, right? So like for teaching, like within Glenn County versus a lot of other counties, we've got a lot of access to really good technology, right? We've got the webcams that we're using right now. We've got the smart boards that we can project on there. We've got really fast internet, not for you guys, but for us we do. And so with all of that, we're able to teach a lot more effectively than places that don't have these things, that are still just writing all their notes up on a projector, which there are counties in Georgia that still do that somehow. All right, so the big thing that I want to look at today is our gross domestic product, or our GDP. So this is the dollar value of all of the final goods added up in our country. And what I mean by final goods is that finished product. So like if we're adding up all of the value of our goods in our economy, like we would include our shoes, but we wouldn't include the shoelaces. We wouldn't include the rubber and the soles. Because we don't want to count everything twice, we only count these final goods. All right, and so this only includes goods made in the United States. All right, and so a weird way of thinking about this is, all right, there's some BMW plants over by Statesboro, over by Georgia Southern. So even though BMW is a German-owned company, that is included in our GDP because those cars were made here in the United States. At the same time, Ford and Chevy has a lot of their auto plants in Mexico. Now, when they build the cars down there, that's included in Mexico's GDP, not ours. And so it's final goods made within the United States is added into our GDP here. All right, and let's look at the ways that we add this up, right? It's by adding up all of our spending together in our economy. So consumer spending would be anything that you and I buy, right? It could be a burger, it could be a house, it could be a car, it could be a watch. Let's say that last year consumers spent $10 trillion, and again, these are just estimates, right? Let's say $10 trillion, I'll put a T for trillion. All right, and then let's say we're looking at business investment. These would be new businesses opening up, businesses getting better technology, businesses training their employees. Let's say the last year businesses invested $4 trillion. All right, so government spending, that could be my paycheck because I'm a teacher, or the military, or building new roads or schools, things like that. All right, and so let's say that last year they spent $3 trillion on the economy. All right, now net exports. So that term net just means total. All right, so if we're exporting goods, that means that we're sending our goods to other countries and we're getting the money in return. So exports, we make money. When we import goods, though, like when we import goods from China, that means we're bringing it in from another country and we're sending them our money. All right, so the exporting country is the one that's going to have the money added onto their GDP. So for the past couple of years, all right, we've exported a lot more, we've imported a lot more than we've exported. So let's say that we've exported last year $4 trillion, all right, and I'll put an X for exporting, all right, and we imported $10 trillion worth of goods, which is, probably about accurate, right? We're importing a lot more than we're exporting. Well, then that's going to be a negative amount. It would be negative $6 trillion. That's money that's left our economy. And then so we'll just add it up, right? So if consumers spent 10 trillion and businesses spent 4 trillion, government spent 3, that would be $17 trillion. And then we lost about $6 trillion in trade. So then our GDP would be about $11 trillion. Let me make sure my math's right on that. My math is generally pretty bad. So our GDP would be about $11 trillion there. And so that's adding up all of the spending within our economy. Consumer spending, think about like a CGI movie, right? We have consumer spending, government spending, business investments, and then exports minus imports make our GDP. All right, and so with supply and demand, all right, so we've looked at supply and demand and mapping out our curves. All right, when we look at that term aggregate supply, think of it like aggregate. You're adding together all of the supply, or you're adding together all of the demand. And so now we're just looking at things on a larger level. So just like before, let's say we're looking at houses in the United States, right? We've got price on the y-axis, we've got quantity on the x-axis. All right, our supply curve will go up because as the price goes up, businesses will supply more. And our demand curve will go down because as the price goes up, our demand is going to drop. All right, when we're looking at aggregate supply and aggregate demand, now we're looking at it on a much larger level. We're looking at like the entire country. All right, and so instead of looking at 100 houses or 200 houses, now we're looking at 100,000 houses or 200,000 houses. But supply and demand work the same way, right? So let's say that we're looking at supply of oil on a national level, right? So now we're looking at aggregate supply, our total supply of oil in our country. Well, the United States just opened up a bunch of new oil wells out in North and South Dakota. And so our aggregate supply, and you can just put AS if you want, is going to increase, right? And so our curve is going to slide to the right, and then oil prices are going to go down, right? So it works exactly the same way as supply and demand does. Prices work the same. We're just kind of looking at it on a bigger level now. But we'll do some kind of activities tomorrow to recap over that, just to kind of make sure we're all on the same page with supply and demand. But from the test, y'all did pretty well on that, so I'm not super worried. All right, let's go ahead and flip over to the Google Meet and we'll talk about our activity for today.